US government has spent over a decade telling us that Bitcoin is dangerous. They've called it a bubble, a Ponzi scheme, a national security threat. They've labelled it a tool for criminals, money launderers and terrorists. And yet, despite all of this, they were hoarding it. Now in 2025, after quietly accumulating hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, the US government has finally made it official. A strategic Bitcoin reserve has been created. A national digital asset stockpile has been declared. And for the first time in history, Bitcoin has been classified as a strategic national asset. But the real question is, why now? Why did the US government hold on to massive amounts of Bitcoin for years instead of selling it? Why were large sums of BTC quietly moving between government-controlled wallets? What does this reserve mean for the future of the financial markets? And what does this reserve mean for the future of crypto? Let's investigate what the real motives behind the US government's Bitcoin stockpile could be, and the dark possibilities that come with it. Because history has shown us, time and time again, governments don't hoard assets without a plan. And this time, the plan could change everything. If there's one thing the US government has made clear over the years, it's this: they don't trust crypto. For more than a decade, top US officials and regulators have painted Bitcoin as a threat to financial stability, an enabler of crime, and a risk to the dollar's dominance. Maybe some examples will help refresh your memory. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in 2021 stated she thinks many cryptocurrencies are used, at least in a transaction sense, for illicit financing. The SEC Chair Gary Gensler in 2021, this is like the Wild West. There's a lot of fraud, scams and abuse in the crypto space. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, 2021, cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and unsuitable as a means of payment. And how about this one? Trump, 2019, I am not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are not money, and whose value is highly volatile and based on thin air. And yet, despite this consistent narrative, the US government has held on to more Bitcoin than almost any private institution. Why? The SEC, led by Gary, went to war with crypto companies, suing Ripple, Coinbase, Binance, and countless others. They tried to choke off the industry. But despite all of these attacks, Bitcoin survived. And not only did it survive, it became stronger. And that's when the US government changed tactics. Instead of fighting Bitcoin head on, they started accumulating it. For years, the US government has quietly become one of the largest holders of Bitcoin in the world. Through seizures, raids, and legal actions, they have amassed an enormous stockpile of digital assets, a stockpile they had somewhat kept hidden from the public. As of 2025, US agencies, including the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and the Department of Justice, are estimated to control over 200,000 Bitcoin, tens of thousands of Ethereum, Monero, and other altcoins collected through confiscations and legal settlements. Assets valued at over $20 billion, making the US government one of the largest Bitcoin holders on Earth. What's even stranger, these funds weren't just sitting still. Blockchain analysts discovered suspicious movements of Bitcoin from government-controlled wallets prior to Trump being elected. 10,000 plus BTC transfers between internal accounts, massive shifting of funds between federal agencies, and unexplained test transactions to external wallets. And yet, none of it was being sold. Why? Were they testing methods to manipulate Bitcoin's price? Or were they preparing for something much bigger? On March the 6th, 2025, everything changed. President Trump signed the executive order officially establishing the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and Digital Assets Stockpile. Notably, Bitcoin and select cryptocurrencies are now classified as strategic national assets. The government will not actively buy more crypto, but will evaluate ways to acquire additional reserves. The government will not sell its holdings. The assets will be stored and managed under direct federal control. At first, this might sound neutral, but let's look closer. The executive order states that the US government will explore avenues for increasing the National Digital Asset Reserve in a manner that supports the economic and strategic interests. In other words, they plan to acquire more. But how? What are the alternatives? 1. Seizing more crypto. Expanding legal powers to confiscate Bitcoin from businesses, exchanges, and even individuals. 2. Imposing crypto taxes. Taxing Bitcoin directly or forcing holders to liquidate. 3. Controlling on-ramps. Replacing gold with Bitcoin, making the US the first nation to shift its wealth to digital assets. And that last one, it's already becoming the new retail narrative. For decades, gold has been the foundation of economic stability. It has backed currencies, secured national reserves, and been used as a hedge against inflation. As the US government unveils its strategic Bitcoin reserve, a shadow looms over its gold reserves. The US claims to hold over 8,100 metric tons of gold, primarily stored at Fort Knox. But no comprehensive audit has been conducted since 1953. Restricted access fuels decades of speculation about whether the gold is actually still there. Some reports suggest the gold has been leased out to foreign entities, meaning it no longer physically exists in reserves. The United Kingdom faces a similar controversy. Multiple analysts have also suggested the Bank of England's gold reserves are far lower than actually reported. So the real question is, are governments shifting to Bitcoin because they no longer have the gold they claim to? If gold reserves are missing, loaned out, or misinterpreted, then Bitcoin becomes the perfect distraction, a new reserve narrative that conveniently replaces a broken system before the public notices. Is this what's really happening? So what does the US do? They create a new financial narrative, the manufactured shift, Bitcoin is the new gold. Soon, we could start hearing a phrase from government officials, economists, and the financial elite. Gold is outdated, Bitcoin is the future. We could see, as an example, mainstream media pushing stories on why gold is obsolete, government spokespeople arguing that gold reserves should be converted into modern digital assets, an independent financial analyst calling Bitcoin the only true hedge against inflation. And when the time is right, they'll announce the policy shift. Think about it, the timing is strange to say the least. Plus, who created the digital gold narrative? It wasn't Satoshi. The phrase digital gold was not mentioned once in the white paper. On paper, selling Bitcoin to gold sounds extreme, I know that, but in reality it serves several key government interests. 1. Maintaining global financial dominance. China and Russia have spent years aggressively accumulating gold as a hedge against the US dollar. China has over 2,000 tons of gold and is pushing for a gold-backed digital yuan. Russia has increased its gold reserves whilst reducing reliance on the US banking system. If gold-backed currencies gain traction, a possibility with the BRICS alliance, it could challenge the supremacy of the US dollar. But if the US front-runs the Bitcoin standard, they can control the next evolution of financial power before their rivals get there. 2. Creating a new financial bubble. The economy needs new liquidity cycles. Gold, it's stagnant. Real estate, somewhat maxed out. And the stock market, over-leveraged. But Bitcoin is fresh. Kinda. By selling gold to buy Bitcoin, the government could inject billions into crypto markets, creating a new financial mania for retail investors to chase. A new bubble, a new cycle of wealth transfer, and a new asset class to dominate. If you've seen our previous video and thoughts on an alt season, perhaps this is the trick, the beginning of the end. 3 is controlling Bitcoin from the inside. If Bitcoin replaces gold, it becomes the global store of value. And if the US government owns a massive chunk of the Bitcoin supply, they gain market influence, price control, and the ability to manipulate supply-demand dynamics. Bitcoin's decentralization, that could be gone forever. At first glance, replacing gold with Bitcoin sounds progressive, but dig deeper and the risks become clear. A digital financial trap. Once the transition is made, gold would be useless to the average person. What happens if Bitcoin wallets become government controlled? What happens if transactions require KYC approval? What happens when the only way to access wealth is through digital identity verification? This isn't just a currency change, This is a financial control grid. There's a black swan risk. What if Bitcoin crashes? If the US moves billions from gold into Bitcoin and the market collapses, they could trigger a global currency crisis, massive wealth destruction, and an excuse to introduce a centralized alternative like a US CBDC. And just like that, Bitcoin could be absorbed into the very system it was meant to replace. And what if, after years of stockpiling, the government flips the script completely? They own enough Bitcoin to move the market, they regulate on-ramps and exchanges, and they push out the competition. And then one day, they announce, for national security reasons, all private Bitcoin holdings must be converted to government wallets. A mandatory buyback, a forced transition, and just like that, Bitcoin is no longer a free asset. It's a state-controlled digital gold. Bitcoin was created to free the people from government control, but now the US government is one of the largest holders. They're creating a new financial narrative to acquire more. They're setting the stage for a financial shift that could trap the public in a digital-only economy. We have to ask, is this the first step towards Bitcoin being nationalized? Will they use their stockpile to manipulate the market? And are we about to enter a world where Bitcoin is controlled by the very people it was meant to overthrow? Because if Bitcoin is no longer free, then what was it all for?